So there was this fire, then there was like a spit for roasting a chicken, and connected to the spit there was a perforated metal barrel with a door. You'd open the door, you'd put the green coffee in, the spit was pushed over the fire, which was inside a housing like a bakery oven, and you would watch the coffee and listen to the coffee and time the coffee, when the smoke was the right color, and you would count it off the right number of minutes, providing that you didn't forget where you were in the middle of the count, and the cracking and the popping of the beans sounded right, you pull the beans in their contraption on the rail that is on the spit out of the oven, open the trap door, turn the thing upside down, and the beans would fall into it like hot, sizzling, smoking beans would fall into a trough where you would have shovels and wooden forks to move them around. Sometimes you'd sprinkle them like with a watering can a little bit to get to them to drop the temperature. This is very similar. It's called quenching, by the way. It's still done in major coffee roasting equipment. This is the same reason why you run a 3-minute egg under cold water. When you're making a 3-minute egg and the egg timer runs out, or the egg timer goes beep, 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 if it's an electronic one by Westinghouse, about $19, you can buy them in Macy's basement, Zabar's. You should all have them. Not for eggs, for timing your coffee. They would, you got the 3-minute egg, you take the 3-minute egg out, you walk it to the table, you crack open the 3-minute egg, you sit down, you open the Sunday Times, you put the spoon in, you go, oh my God, it's a 4.5-minute egg. But I timed it. Dummy. Heat is retained in things that cook. It kept cooking while you were trying to find the sports section. So what do? You do that once, you learn your lesson, or you remember what Mommy said, you take the egg off the stove, you immediately run it under cold water, the heat transfers, the egg cools immediately, and you have a 3-minute and 10-second egg, which is what you really wanted. And if you're smart, you only keep it in the water for 2 minutes and 50 seconds to cover the 10 seconds that it takes you to get. Same thing with coffee beans. We quench them a little bit. Not enough to get it to retain the water, just enough to stop the action of the fire. Okay? And artisan roasters, who some of them don't like the idea of quenching because you're adding an ingredient. What they do is they bring the roast up to here and cut the flame so that as it cools, it comes up to where they want it without having to put in water. Different styles for different artisans. Okay? But when you're roasting relatively large batches, let's say over 50, 75 pounds at a time, it's really, really tough to pull a roast. That means remove a roast at the perfect time without a little bit of a water quench. Anyway, James Burns, great name. Some people just have great names. Okay? The guy who started our business name was Wright. What a wonderful early 19th century name, Wright Gillies. I mean, it reeks of 19th century hands-on, roll up the sleeves, get good clean coffee dirt under your fingernails kind of a name. James Burns saw the way coffee was roasted, and he said, I'm going to solve the problem. I'm going to figure out how to get the coffee out of the roaster without removing the cylinder from the oven. If I can figure out how to get the coffee out of the cylinder without removing the cylinder from the oven, I just saved everybody half the time of roasting. They can roast twice as much, same amount of manpower, reduces the price of manufacturing the product. They make more money, they're going to pay me for my invention. Look how much I'm going to save these guys. And over a period of time, he invented a series of left and right swinging flanges. What does that mean? It means on the inside of the barrel, He put strips of steel that wind their way toward the back like a corkscrew. And he did it edge on. If you've ever seen a horizontal front load clothes washing machine, and you look inside, you will see these flanges, now made of plastic, invented by James Burns. It's so that when the barrel turns, the clothes, by centrifugal force, don't just cling to the edges. What they do is, they tumble. The beans tumble. The beans don't scorch by touching the hot surfaces. They keep moving. But something else happens. If they're in the barrel, they're moving not just this way. Because the flanges are curved, they move front to back, front to back. Put the cylinder without a front end into the roaster, loading from the top with a door on the front. The beans run to the back, hit the back wall, run to the front, hit the front wall, run to the back, hit the back wall, run to the front, hit the front wall. Gee, the coffee's finished. Open the door. When they run to the front, they fall out. Mr. Burns made a small fortune, very fast. Everybody threw away their Carter roasters and started switching to the new James Burns roaster. And first, I believe, on Orange Street, and later, here just on the corner of 43rd and 11th Avenue. His building is still standing. His name is still on the building, James Burns and Son. You can go see where the modern coffee roaster was built, and it was built for everybody. Name a brand that was around in the late 19th century, 20th century in the United States. By the 1880s, 1890s, James Burns roasters were the only roasters used. Okay? As far as I know, there's still the predominant roaster in the American coffee trade, not just for big roasters, but for small artisan kind of roasters too. Okay? The 23R model, which is a 4-bag roaster that can be fitted with automatic clean out. That is, you don't have to take it apart to clean it every day. Also fitted with environmental controls and with automated operating systems, originally called FireEye by James Burns, but now called other things by other manufacturers, is all over the city. You can find them at White Coffee in Long Island City, Henna Coffee in Brooklyn. You can find them at Little D'Amico also in Brooklyn, Dallas Roast with a 23R in Ozone Park, New York, Barry House Roast with 23Rs in Mount Vernon, New York. I think they're still in Mount Vernon, the plant is anyway. R23s are the standard for the American coffee trade if you're in the wholesale coffee roasting business. Made in New York, but not anymore. And that begins the sad part of the story. Because what happened to the New York coffee industry happens to all industries in cities that decide that they don't want to be industrial cities anymore. Some cities, like Detroit, couldn't help themselves. Hey, shit happens. But New York City did it to itself. New York City somehow, along the way, determined that it wanted to be a white-collar town. I'm not really sure when it happened. It happened so gradually that it was almost imperceptible for many, many years. But it did happen. And I believe it was by design as much as by economics. That is, by political design. But I can't prove it. But in this city, at the close of World War II, there were somewhere between 750,000 and 900,000 blue-collar jobs. They were jobs that were related to the maritime history of this greatest natural harbor in all of the Western Hemisphere. They were stevedores. They were warehousemen. They were sailors. They were ship chandlers. They were coffee roasters. They were grain merchants. They were people that made things with leather and people that made things with cloth. They were people that that bought and sold, manufactured and traded every size, manner, construction, and description of goods that you could think of. For this city was a dirty, grimy, wonderful port city along its edges. The edges of Staten Island, the edges of Manhattan, the edges of Queens, the edges of Brooklyn. A wonderful, dirty, smelly, terrific, noisy, angry, dangerous place. A place that you can only dream about when you go to South Street Seaport and hear the sea chanties and have a lobster and get the Disney version of the New York waterfront. I saw only the tail end of it. But on the waterfront, which takes place in New Jersey, starring Marlon Brando and Eva Marie Saint, gave you somewhat of the taste, of the feel, of the kind of sort of idea of what the seafront in the city was in its last years. After World War II, and probably for some time before, the docks had been controlled to some degree, or a major degree, by organized crime in the city. They had infiltrated the unions and controlled what was going on the docks. That meant graft, corruption, and also high prices for people who had to work through the docks. And remember, these docks really carried everything. Go back to the early part of the 19th century. It's not just that we handled coffee and immigration and tea and rice and stuff coming in from southern ports like Charleston or the West Indies or from Europe or from Africa. New York handled slaves too, you know, up until the early 1800s. But also